Hello and welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, for commenting, of course, and liking. But first and foremost, I would like to thank the people who are generously sponsoring this channel, because it really is mostly for you that I'm doing these videos. Thank you ever so much. It is much appreciated. Off and on, I have been talking about or mentioning this book that I'm working on, and I decided it is about time that I clarified exactly what I'm doing, or, well, as near as exactly. And so today I will show you some of the material that I'm working on. I will talk about some of the discoveries and what I'm hoping to achieve by the time this project is done. From this channel and from my previous comments and videos, those of you who have watched before will be perfectly well aware that my real love in life is 17th century English and Dutch shipbuilding. So it will come as absolutely no surprise, I'm sure, that by ill fortune and general cock-up, I have actually become the world's expert on Ottoman seafaring, anywhere from the 17th through the early mid-19th century. What can I say? Wasn't exactly what I planned to do, but this is what has happened. And currently, after a number of projects in this sphere, I decided to put them together into a book for final publication. And a brief history of many of the projects, and in a moment I will start showing you at least one of the models that I'm working on at the moment. So, after this rather lengthy introduction, let's talk a little bit about the specific vessels. In the pre-dawn of history, when dinosaurs were still walking the earth, and I was a master's student at Texas A&M University in the Nautical Archaeology program. God bless them all for what they gave me. Incredible professors, incredible people. At the time, as most great things beginning, we decided to go for a visit in the Black Sea area of the coast of Bulgaria to look what sort of wrecks are likely to be there, considering how incredibly rich the history of the region that is now the Republic of Bulgaria has been through history. The oldest Greek colonies are in the Black Sea, actually were in Bulgaria. Suzopou is Apollonia Pontica, and the list goes on and on about such sites. So, this, you can see, decision was made over pints of Guinness in the local pub, together with our professors, at the time Professors Hocker and McManaman. And I mentioned that, yeah, I might go and try to do a search. So the two of them said, great, Kroum, we'll join you. And a friend of mine, Troy Novak, also joined me. Subsequently, another well-known archaeologist, Mark Potzer, also joined during the excavation seasons. Long story short, we began to excavate a shipwreck that we were told has been completely excavated before. They had not recorded the hull because it didn't have the knowledge for this, but removed all the artifacts, and it really is just 3 by 3 meters of hull structure surviving. Nothing were there. So, Kroum, don't waste time on this, says our Bulgarian colleagues. There is a prehistoric settlement right next to it. Let's do the settlement. To which Kroum more or less politely answered, let's not do the settlement and let's do the shipwreck. It was advice of one of my chairman and close personal friend, who suggests, Kroum, many people do surveys. Everybody loves to do survey. No one likes to excavate because it is too much responsibility, too much hard work, and takes time. But if this is only 3 by 3 meter surviving structure, this is going to produce a wonderful article in less than a season of excavation. You just uncover it, document, produce a preliminary report, and then with the credentials established thereof, you can look at greater, bigger things, surveys, etc., because you know been a known quantity. Yeah, more or less that's how it worked out in the long term. In the short term, what was supposed to be a 3 by 3 meter proved to be 19.5 meter long survival by about 6 meter, more like 7.5 meter survival, the wreck area of a ship that almost certainly once upon a time was somewhere around 23 meters at least. Well, what can I say? All I can say in my defense is that my future projects were more predictable than this. 4 seasons later, we had completed this wreck. It proved to be quite interesting. We were able to date it mostly thanks to artifacts that were found, for not all artifacts had been raised in the previous campaigns in the 1980s. We excavated between 2000 and 2003. At the end of the day, this proved to be the first completely excavated shipwreck, especially from the Ottoman period, in the entire Black Sea region. No mean achievement, you will say. On the one hand side, this sounds absolutely fabulous. We're at the forefront of research. Yes, but no. As I have said many times before, archaeology likes repetition. Archaeology does not like anything original. We do prefer things to be repetitive, because then we can answer the bigger questions. If you have only one object of a certain type, then you can say this object is made this way. It doesn't mean that the whole tradition involved only this. So, I excavated, reconstructed it for my doctoral dissertation. This has been published in many articles by now, and at the moment, there is a model being built of it. This has been published, but subsequently, during the Black Sea map, we documented a whole series of Ottoman wrecks at the depth of the Black Sea. And more than half of the vessels that we discovered, of course, belong to the Ottoman period. And they are very interesting as a group. Individually, they may not rank as high as, let's say, a Roman wreck for many people, but taken as a group, they are giving us an incredible, bigger picture of seafaring in the Black Sea during the Ottoman period. We all know that the Ottoman Empire heavily depended on shipping, because the only way that you could feed Constantinople, aka Istanbul, was by shipping provisions into it. Anything from charcoal, through timber for construction, through food supplies was shipped into the city, which for most of the early modern period was the most populous city in the Mediterranean world, with population variably calculated to be between 500,000 and 750,000, by far the largest city until the 18th century in the Mediterranean world. Because of the Kitten ship, it automatically came upon me to study and publish the other Ottoman wrecks. As if this was not enough of an undertaking, Dr. Gerbov and myself started excavating 2-3 years ago a shipwreck very close to the one that originally I excavated for my dissertation with the colleagues from the Center for Underwater Archaeology there. So we are digging another ship that is even bigger than the old one, the previous one, and is even better preserved. In this case, even parts of the deck are still in place. So now let me show you some pictures from this wreck, the Kitten shipwreck, because really everything started there. All the studies of Black Sea seafaring in the post-medieval period began there. My career was launched by this wreck, ironically enough. And whenever there is an Ottoman wreck, sooner or later, I know about it. So, in the photos, what you see is we have surviving the starboard side of the ship. And what became very interesting very early on was the regularity of the framing of the ship. The timber is in outstanding state of preservation wherever it was buried deep in the mud. But the upper top timbers, the very ends of the frames, are thoroughly eaten up by wood-eating worm of an identified kind. We attempted, of course, to take samples for dendro analysis and dendrochronology to date based on the rings of the timbers. The problem that we encountered was that there are no master curves for the region. Only now, after the KITTEN excavations, Bulgarian colleagues are beginning to attempt to develop such master curves from the forestry department. And prior to that, they couldn't come. Professor Cunningham told me that he can pretty much put the timber in whatever time period I want this timber to be, because of the lack of master curves, because of limited survival, and because the master shipwright had done us a really bad service. These people did not know the meaning of lack of timber. So he chopped off the hardwood, he chopped off the outer rings of the timber when he converted it into frames, into planking, etc., and left only the hardest, the strongest part of the oak in timber. Fantastic, you will say. It's amazing how high quality the oak actually is. Very few knots, very strong, in very good condition, clearly old growth timber in fairly large sizes. For example, on a ship that eventually we dated to the beginning of the 19th century, the reign of Sultan Selim III, so tail end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, based on artifacts, we still see Y-shaped timbers or crutches as floor timbers in the bow and in the stern area. And that, of course, was notable on its own. But what is even more notable in this instance was the fact that the middle part of the vessel had the futtocks and the floor timbers scarfed together with the help of a hook that it pretty much looks exactly the same way. Two notches into the two timbers match against each other. They are through fastened with one nail and one trannel, probably driven from opposite directions as far as we could tell. And the joint is covered by heavy planking and a bilge stringer. The bilge stringer itself is covered up with two thicker planks. There is no ceiling on this vessel, just as there is no ceiling on most traditional Mediterranean vessels. There are stringers, fairly closely spaced stringers on the inside, but no actual ceiling except on top of the floor timbers. The floor planking, the ceiling planking on the floor timbers is actually nailed in place, so could not be removed. And therefore, this leaves open the question, how did they clean the passage for the water to the pump? We did discover a pump opening next to the mast step on the starboard side. Only one pump sump was there, but at the time of sinking, there was no pump inside the ship, because there is a plank that was put on top of this hole and was buried under shingle ballast. Seamanship? Oh yes. Perhaps I will do later on a third video specifically on seamanship and what records we have of seamanship in this area, especially from the memoirs of contemporary seamen and travelers. It is deeply entertaining read. I strongly recommend Greeks who may get offended not to watch that video and not to read the contemporary accounts of travelers either. Returning to the KITTEN shipwreck. So it was a very interesting site because it had so many anomalies. It is a 19th century vessel, or very early years of the 19th century, but has features that we have found as far back as the Middle Ages. In overall shape, it is not too different from the 7th century Asada wreck, or even the Serceliman, although it is closer, it is narrower than the Serceliman, so it's probably closer to the Yasada. It has constructional features that we find in the Central Mediterranean. A number of wrecks of the Big Mediterranean islands have shown similar connections between floor timbers and futtocks. Then we have the Yasada 16th century wreck, which has exactly the same construction. But there are some differences. In the case of the Kitten shipwreck, only half the frames, 27 of them, in the central part of the hull are hook-scarfed. The bow and the stern area are just nailed and held together by a single nail between floor timber and wronghead and the heels of the futtocks. It is quite clear that the central part, the frames were assembled and raised already assembled into place, because there is no other way that you could have fastened from both directions the connection. But that is not the case with the bow and the stern. So we are definitely seeing the traditional Mediterranean style of shaping the vessel that is recorded as far back as the beginning of the 15th century, and we have some archaeological evidence for the late 14th century that demonstrates this. The Kavakulip 6 wreck, for example, is showing these features. And this is quite exciting. Because we had so much of the wreck surviving, I was able to reverse engineer the whole process of design of the vessel. I determined the mezzoluna proportions that were used for the narrowing and rising of the vessel. Certainly for the narrowing, the lower rising line appears to have followed actually a mezzarola, although it is just as easy to achieve by simply hanging a string in place. It is entirely metal fastened. The only place where I did find tunnels was in the connection between the futtock and the floor timber. Everything else is square shank iron nail fastened. And that is where the vessels, the wrecks themselves, are now failing. More about this in another part, in a next video, when I'm discussing the Black Sea Ottoman wrecks from the Black Sea map, and also the wreck that we are currently excavating. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all the best. Huge thank you, especially to the generous sponsors of this channel, and I will see you soon again.